everyone. Welcome to Next Level Humanity podcast, Masters Unplugged. I have dear Shazia Hussain here. Welcome, Shazia.
Thank you for having me.
You're an entrepreneur, a TEDx speaker, big on inclusion and neurodiversity, which I am very interested in. We'll talk about that later. Your journey isn't typical because you're navigating corporate roles to founding multiple ventures. How did your early life and identity shape your determination to thrive in male-dominated industries?
I think that I was always at an intersection of society. So as a woman of colour, and later finding out that I was neurodivergent, my lived experience was that things were going to be challenging and that my journey wasn't going to be necessarily like straightforward as well. So it wasn't a conscious effort for me. It was more about lived experience and how those like challenges that I knew were going to be there just made me more resilient and ready for obstacles. And the fact that I was very stubborn as well, I think led me to those ventures and the work that I've been doing recently.
And how did you find out that you were neurodivergent?
I think it was something that I always felt that I didn't quite belong or like fit into environments, like especially growing up at school, working in the corporate sector and then entering into the business world. I just felt that there was always something that was a little bit different about the way that I was processing information.
Because I'm a neurodivergent myself, so I'm familiar with that. How did you find out about it? It's usually not fitting in. My experience have been not fitting in to the existing structure and to the existing systems and thinking outside the box. And how's your experience?
Yeah, I mean, there were elements of a lot of like entrepreneurial like ideas that I was coming up with working in the corporate world. I was always just a little bit different, right? Like my ideas were always a little bit unorthodox. I did things differently, and because of that, I was always kind of somebody that was standing out quite a lot. And when I was younger and earlier on in my career, especially as a woman working in a very male-dominated environment, I almost wanted to not stand out. And it's only like later on in life that I've actually realized that standing out and being different and being very like outside of the norm is a powerful thing. So now I kind of like embrace those elements. But I mean, it was important for me to understand like why I was doing certain things, like communication styles, for example. One of the things that I always say is that being an intersectional woman, like lying within like gender, race, neurodivergence is something that I really identify myself within that kind of category. And I generally have always like flocked towards other neurodivergent people as well. And because I didn't quite belong into any other community, I kind of realized like very quickly that there was something about other neurodivergents and the way that they were communicating that I quite liked or that I vibed from as well. And I think within that neurodivergent community, I found belonging and I almost found my tribe, right? So it was an interesting one because actually once I found my tribe and I identified the fact that, look, you know, having a label like such as like ADHD or dyslexia or dyspraxia is actually quite helpful because it's about having a common language, right, to like communicate with others. And also whilst you have that common language, you can also identify areas of like relatability, right? So other neurodivergents having the same issues and challenges that I was having, for example, like social awkwardness, not having a filter, being very like sensitive to like certain stresses, a little bit more than neurotypical people, and just wanting to understand like actually what was going on. And once I identified that I did have like ADHD and dyslexia and dyspraxia, I mean, that diagnosis for me was like a game changer because I started to understand that there's many positives about having, especially something like ADHD, right? Like it gives you so much more energy. It's like you're processing information, you're coming up with ideas so much quicker than someone else will. And I started to utilize like those like positive messages and those benefits to my advantage, both in the corporate world and also in my business.
Yeah.
And also created a business for neurodivergent talent to also thrive in corporates, and also to help corporates to create the right environments when neurodivergent talent is not necessarily like falling off or even getting like interviews and things. Just creating environments that can support that talent pool was really important for me, because I was somebody that had struggled myself working for, you know, like some of the leading investment banks out there and like some of the biggest like blue chip corporates in the world, right? Like I understood.
Yeah, it's not easy for a neurodivergent, I think, to work on the corporate level. It's easy when you do your own thing, because you have your own style, and like you said, you're just thinking outside the box and you create businesses around that. But a corporate world, it's a whole different story.
It's completely different. And I think that that's where actually I benefited actually from having both that business and that kind of corporate background, because I understood like systems and some of the biases that might happen, especially within talent attraction, because that's an area that I have been working in for the last like 15 years. So it's like I knew internally what, you know, the application process is like for somebody that's neurodivergent, and also working within those environments, what adjustments typically people with neurodivergent need in order to even like go through an application process, right? Because getting a job is one thing, holding on to a job is another. And then, you know, the application process is something that is an interesting one, both for neurodivergents and women, because typically a neurodivergent will look at a specification, or so will a woman. And if they don't see all of the skill sets that they meet 100%, generally it's like they just won't apply for that job. Whereas a man, typically what we see in recruitment
10%.
teams, 10% is absolutely enough. And you know, the confidence levels, right, that men go into interviews and jobs with are completely different. So it's like, for me, my business has been about kind of leveling that playing field and supporting both women and neurodivergents into like the corporate sector, and just like coaching them about understanding what that system is where it's biased, and how to kind of like bend those rules to your advantage, which is something that I had to navigate for 15 years of my work experience. So, you know, the element of being relatable really like helped, and also having like that lived experience working in those corporations as well. Does that make sense?
Exactly. And you said embracing, you know, yourself and understanding that you are neurodivergent is very important for success and very important for individuals. Like I remember myself, the first 25 years of my life have been really tough because I was so different and I just didn't fit in any level, and I thought there was a problem with me. And I kept on thinking, you know, when you're thinking outside the box, it's kind of like, because there are more people who are thinking in the box because of their number. And that was my experience, because there were more people who were able to be in the box, and I was kind of like one who was outside. I thought there was something wrong with. So I think for neurodivergent individuals, understanding that this is not a problem, you know, this like, you know, standing out, it's not a problem. It is something even, you know, good. You can just acknowledge that, and is very important. So anyone who's listening who is, you know, different, thinking outside the box, neurodivergent, what would you say with your own experience, you know, about how they can embrace it, and about embracing these, you know, qualities, I would say, so that they can go on with their lives, and how and why it's so important to embrace that for success and in leadership.
And they are qualities as well. Like I always say that my neurodivergence is my superpower. It's like lots of people say, okay, well, you know, everybody seems to have like ADHD these days, and that label is something that is going to be stuck with them for, like, the label is often stigmatized. And what I always say is that the label actually does have its benefits because it gives you a common language, like one within your like tribe or your community with other like neurodivergence or whatever intersection you sit at. But the thing about neurodivergence is that it's something that we have to like take ownership of, especially if we are going to work in the corporate sector, because, you know, the corporate world are doing all kinds of things to basically like support neurodivergence through the application process, through the interviewing process. When we are hired, companies want to retain that talent as well. But ultimately, it's like we need to know how to support ourselves as well and be able to ask for adjustments that we might need in order to work within like those environments as well. Because working in an office, you know, although these days with like lockdown, we have a lot more remote opportunities, we have hybrid working, we have like different like flexible like working hours, ultimately for a neurodivergent sat in an office from like 9 till 5, it's like, you know, it's something that it's like, you know, would like freak and did freak me out for a really, really long time. But it's about actually like, how can I thrive in that environment, right? Because ultimately, we as employees do need to be in the office as well. And actually, like what I found is that I also, if I can adjust the environment to like fit my needs, it's something that can become quite enjoyable as well, right?
So you're clearly helping neurodivergent individuals who are employers and who are in the corporate level, because I also know a lot of founders who are neurodivergent, and they haven't, like me, I haven't ever worked at a corporate company because of what you say, because I know myself, I just can't. You know, my mind is just it's just, you know, I just can't sit at one place. It's just floating elsewhere.
Yeah.
It's, you know.
So absolutely. And that's why, like, having experience, like working in an office, doing that 9 till 5.
So I think employers need your support more than
absolutely.
maybe founders.
And also the neurodivergent community as well, because they relate to me, because I've lived that experience. I know about having those water cooler conversations where, you know, I will always like say the most like strangest, like absurd thing in a meeting, or I'll go into a boardroom situation and I'll just feel like such like, if there was ever the wrong thing to say, like I will generally like make that point in a meeting, right?
So I understand.
Like feeling so out of place in those environments has actually equipped me to help that talent pool to actually to understand what they need, right?
And benefit from your experience.
Yeah. So there's many different adjustments that can be requested. And I always say that, like working with the corporations that I work with, because that talent pool, they know me and they know that I've lived through those experiences, I can help them to understand what adjustments do they need in order to work in an office environment. Because being in an office is actually like quite advantageous, because you learn different skills being around people. You are with like senior leadership. A lot of promotion pathways actually within the corporate world lie in the social gatherings that can sometimes take place outside of the office as well. And if you're not in that office and if you're not visible, I always say it doesn't matter like how hard you're working. It's like, you know, visibility is like having presence within your team is important, right? And there's many different ways to have visibility. One of them is to actually be present, right? Like we want to know who we're working with because we are social beings. But I think with the neurodivergent community, we get so anxious around this idea that we're not going to be able to fit in, that we're going to be othered, or we're not going to belong. And it's like basically supporting neurodivergence to understand actually with adjustments, like for example, when I'm working in an office, I always say that one of the things that really helps me is having a desk next to the window, because I'm somebody that needs a lot of light. I can't work in dark environments. Or if I've got like busy periods where I've got to like get through lots of like processing information, or I've had like 10 different meetings and I'm overstimulated by so many different people. It's like I'd quite like a private room where I can
Yeah.
go into and just use as a reset and just process information like silently. Sometimes meeting rooms are not always available,
Hmm.
especially like post lockdown, where office sizes are being reduced because we've got hybrid working. But in those cases where you do have to work in an office, in an open plan office, like noise cancellation headphones always really
Yeah.
work, or
Yeah.
AirPods, right? Where you can actually say to your team that, look, I just need time to just like basically like get through whatever tasks I need to get through. And I would appreciate it if I could just like
Mm.
put my headphones or earphones in and just get on with that task. It doesn't mean that I'm being awkward. It doesn't mean that I don't want to speak to you. It just means that I need to like process like
Yeah.
those tasks and get things done. So there's many different like aspects that we can actually communicate, right? And just encourage like neurodivergents to actually communicate
Yeah.
like how they're feeling, why they're feeling a certain way, because often it's just like the tiniest little adjustment that can help somebody go from an environment where they absolutely hate it or they're terrified of like going into work to actually feeling supported, right? Because the reality of the situation is that building inclusive workforces, it has never been so important, especially like I've been working in tech for the last like 15 years, and we have been at the forefront of getting more women onto like engineering teams,
Mm-hmm.
LGBT, neurodivergence, like race, all of these different like intersections are so important, because having people from different backgrounds, walks of life, thinking differently, build better companies, build
Yeah.
better businesses,
Yeah.
right? Because we don't all want to like walk the same talk, the same look, the same,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Difference is really important. And the most innovative companies out there understand that and accelerate that like performance into their teams, right? And it's an interesting one because that's where like innovation happens,
Mm.
right? So we do want neurodivergence
Yeah, we
working
do. Yeah.
within the corporate
The
sector,
corporates agreed.
and feeling like creating the psychological safety where we can actually ask for those adjustments is really important. And that's where I'm very passionate about the work that I do. And I've seen how my own life has been transformed by speaking honestly about some of the challenges that I was having, and how I can support that community to basically get into work, right? Because there is an aspect of people with neurodivergence as well. I think like I'm not really that great at stats, but a lot of like neurodivergence, if they don't understand what is actually going on with them neurologically, it's like it can lead to like addictions, it can lead to
Yes.
getting involved with the wrong crowd, like ending up doing something that you thought was going to be quite harmless, and it can turn into something that is quite severe. And lots of neurodivergent women as well are ending up in the prison system as well. So it's really interesting. Like I did a talk at a ladies' prison actually recently, and I had never been to a prison before, and I was just like, I really wanted to do the talk because I understood that a lot of those women there, it would have been the first time that they'd ever even heard of that word neurodivergence,
No.
or,
Yeah.
they would have just internalized like their behavior as, oh, it's something like wrong with me, or it's like, I've always felt like I don't belong. Once people can understand why, like what's going on and why they're behaving in certain ways, it's powerful, right?
Yeah.
Because then you
Yeah.
can start
Acknowledging and
tweaking behavior so that you can align yourself to like environments where you do need to be able to perform in. Like work is such an important part of mental health, right? It's been a massive part of my journey. I've had some of the best experiences of my life, like working in corporates, like the amount of like people that I've met from different backgrounds, right? Like I always say that work And also, like, I mean, university, depending on where you go. I studied in London, so it's like I was always around like diversity, like diversification of people, thought, you know, like, and it rounded me, it shaped me as a human being, right? Not just at work, but like as a person,
Yeah,
right?
human being, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it's really important to understand what's going on and then how you can support yourself or seek support, right? That's really important.
And with that, I'm going to ask you, what internal belief about yourself took the longest to accept? And how did that acceptance become a superpower?
I think, like, for me, it was that, like, intelligence has to be, like, complicated. And what I realized was when I worked with people that I thought had like high IQ, they would go into meeting rooms or they would stand on stages and completely lose their audiences because they weren't able to translate complex ideas into simple language where everybody could understand, right? And that for me was a really interesting one because, you know, I came from a very academic family, so I thought, oh, IQ is like, you know, the most important thing. Then what I realized is that, you know, you see a lot of people with high IQs and no like ability to translate, like, right? Yeah. Emotional intelligence, the ability to relate. But I think I'll come on to the EQ side later. But yeah, IQ, the people that I admire the most are the ones that can translate like complex ideas into like meaningful like language where everybody can understand. Those are the people that I relate to. And I always give like Apple as a great example of, you know, an organization that's managed to do this so well, right? Like they've built a business, like they've built like, you know, like one of the most innovative businesses off the back of building a really complex, like hiding complex language, right? And something that everybody can use, right? So it's like that ability, right? Like like complexity, like translating complex ideas into simple language. And that doesn't necessarily mean that somebody with a high IQ is going to be able to do that. I think IQ and EQ are really, really important because the emotional part of translating your own story into like, you know, how do you like impact somebody's day-to-day life, right? I think that's really important. So that's something that I think I did believe when I was younger, that, you know, people that I didn't necessarily understand what they were talking about were like really, really smart. Now I'm like, well, if I don't understand you, that probably means that no one else does either. And how smart are you? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
right?
It's the IQ. I have thought about that, you know, several times in my life because I also work in the tech community. I have tech companies and also I invest in tech founders. I work with tech founders and I meet some amazing high IQ individuals. And I'm like, bro, I don't know what are you talking about. You're just, it's obvious that they have high IQ and they're from Harvard and MIT and this, but it's like, and that's great. I mean, it's like having the IQ and at the back end, if you're a tech entrepreneur or maybe a tech guy and at the back end, you know, it being that it's kind of like there's a level of nerdishness about that. That's great, you know, but, you know, simplifying is also really, really important, like simplifying the message and, you know, just making it straightforward and simplifying as much as you can. And I think that's where EQ comes into the picture, because if you can't connect with others, you just, or if you don't have the intent to connect with others, then it's kind of like, you know, then it's high IQ but no EQ, then the
nobody's going to be
miscommunication.
interested. So,
and Apple is a great example.
oh, I mean,
it's
Apple,
a great example.
Yeah, some of the
You know,
products
how
are
can
really,
you simplify that thing? Yeah.
Yeah, accessible like products, right? So I've been fortunate enough to work for some of the most innovative like tech companies where, you know, I've worked on accessibility. And, you know, it's interesting because some of the best leaders within those companies have been approaching me as a neurodivergent to actually, oh, do you know what, Shazia, could you like have a look at this app and just see how easy it is for you to like utilize this, or how complex you're finding it? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's something that is is a great thing to do, right? Because
Yeah.
if like I always say that if neurodivergence can like kind of use like certain products,
I mean,
then yeah, just because we do process information like quite differently, and there's like different levels of like neurodivergence as
mhm.
well. So the way that I process information is going to be different to the way that you do.
Yeah.
Like I'm a very visual learner. I have a very like strong audio sense as well, which can actually lead me to not look at somebody in the eye when I'm actually in a business meeting with them,
Mm.
because it's like I need to, in order to concentrate on my ideas, I actually need to go into like the vocal, like the audio aspect
Yeah.
of that communication a
Yeah.
lot. That's one of the reasons why I'm very good at playing the piano as well, which is what I later realized was going on with music. Like music for me has been a massive like source of comfort, right? And then understanding that actually it was that auditory like sense, right, that soothes me,
Yeah.
and the ability to be able to play an instrument. One, it's like I can like
Hmm.
I don't know how to sight read. It's like I can play a piece of music just by listening to
Mm.
that piece of music. So there's different ways that
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
basically like can learn information. And I feel like, the academic system says it's one way and it's a textbook. Well, I got through a degree. I can tell you that I was struggling to read and write, and I still got through that degree. Do you know what I mean? So like how like am I like the one that's like lacking in some kind of like
Or
IQ?
is
Is it the system, right? Because I got through my education because I memorized information, right? And I regurgitated it back. Did I understand anything that those textbooks were like trying to
we have
explain?
such a similar experience. I mean, by the way, I did great at school, but it was like just with memorizing. I used to, with the system we had, I too used to memorize just one day before the exam. And right after the exam, if you ask me one question about what I would just forget it because it was kind of like there was this deadline and it was after the exam. And I would just memorize, do great, and then forget all about it. And then that's like, that's how I did at school. And I got, I don't know, like hundreds in history I don't remember anything about. So is it a good thing or a bad thing? You see how the system lacks. It's very interesting.
And
Yeah.
also, like, the other interesting aspect about education is I always say that, kids should get that diagnosis as early as possible,
Yeah.
because the school
Yeah.
system as well has a duty to support neurodivergence as well. So in my case, it was very extreme, right? Like, I went through school and college and then university without, like, really, I struggled to read, right? It was challenging. Imagine if that neurodivergence had been picked up when I was younger and I had been supported through actually
Yeah.
understanding that I learn through visual aids. My auditory sense is a lot more heightened. It's like I could have done so much better, right? So it's about maximizing on a person's potential, and I believe that every single child has that right. And it starts with the education system as well. So
Yeah.
whilst like things have moved on a lot, I do see time and time again like the education system reverting to this very like prehistoric way of like like absorb data as much as you can, right? And also, what about choosing subjects that you're interested in, that
Yeah.
inspire you,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's taken me a long time to understand like what I actually like what I'm interested in, and where and when I pick up a textbook that I've actually like I've got an interest in that particular topic, generally it's like I'll retain that information and I'll get through it really quickly as well,
Yeah.
because people with ADHD have like hyperfocus as well. And a
Yes.
lot of your
Yeah.
listeners who are listening to this will understand that, yeah, it's like there's certain times where you're just completely like zoned out of
Yeah.
somebody that's giving like a lecture. And then other times it's like if
You're highly interested and you're like zoned in. You don't hear anybody.
yeah, like to the point where
Yeah.
like literally like time can get away from me if I'm interested in an aspect. So like utilize these strengths, utilize the hyperfocus, right? Because it's amazing.
It
Like
is.
if
Yeah.
we choose something that we're interested in, we will generally like really, really,
It's
yeah,
genius.
we will like we will do amazing
Yeah.
things, but
Dive.
it's about like understanding like what we like, what we
Yeah.
don't like. Like just
Yeah, exactly. And from there on, I also would like to ask you, I mean, whether you're also helping neurodivergent people in communication, because I personally have been having problems all my life with communication because of the reason that my mind is working too complex and too fast. And it's kind of like, I think, a classic, but because I'm a business leader, I have teams, I'm trying managing teams. I hear, it's not a question, but I hear kind of like I get the feedback like, would you please tell it again? Because my mind is too fast and I'm, too complicated. And I'm like asking I don't know, for a task, for example. And I'm like, bam, 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 like 10 things. And people are usually like, whoa, So how about the communication with, like, how should the communication of a neurodivergent be with non-neurodivergents? Because I think there lies, especially as a business owner who, also manages teams, I think that's also very challenging. So what do you think about that? Like, what would be the strategy? And I probably found my own strategy, which is, just talking about one topic at a time, and in meetings just having two or three topics, because if I talk about everything, it's like it's too complicated.
mm,
It's like bam, 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 and maybe using some AI to filter so
mm-hmm,
that they can understand better. Because of that fast thinking process and a complicated thinking process, I think it is harder for people who are non-divergent to understand to understand divergent leaders as well. So there is another problem at the back of it. It's if you're a neurodivergent leader, founder, or a company owner, and you're working with non-neurodivergent individuals, there is again a communication problem there.
I would say it's just about addressing that communication style. So,
Yeah.
as I was saying, that like neurodivergence is something that we should feel comfortable to say, actually, do you know what? I have ADHD. It's like, you know, sometimes I'm going to be a little bit quicker than the person that's sat next to me, right? Voicing it, right? Being comfortable enough. And as leaders, creating psychological safety where our employees, whether they're neurotypical, if you're a founder and you're neurodivergent and you've got neurotypical employees, let them know, right? That,
Yeah.
oh, this is my style of communication, and sometimes it can be like really fast, but this is the way
Yeah.
that I think. If you're feeling overwhelmed, let me know, and then I will break things down, whether that's a recorded transcript, whether that's a summary of the information that you've just. I always say that my communication style can sometimes be that I know I don't have a social filter, so I can sometimes just blurt things out, right? But
Yeah, I know it.
I'm
To
comfortable enough to say, look,
yeah.
sometimes I'm going to blurt stuff out, right? Or I might even interrupt in a meeting, especially when I was younger working in male dominated teams, right? Where like male communication styles are very much like, you know, the loudest voice in the room is the one that wins, right? Like it's competitive. I always say the loudest voice in the room is not necessarily the smartest, but going back to like that style of communication, I felt when I was younger, okay, I'll interrupt them, right? Just to get my idea across. And then I realized that like interrupting is something that I will still do if I deem that like, you know, it's necessary, but just like interruptions can be like stereotypical ways that
Mm.
people with ADHD are perceived, right? And whilst like stereotypes can be can you know be like a disadvantage, they can be quite helpful as well, right? Because it's like, you know, I can say that sometimes I will, like, it might seem like an interruption, it might seem that I go into a meeting and I blurt an idea out, but then I can also say that yeah, a lot of when I blurt information out, like 90% of it probably won't be the best idea ever, but you know, that 10%, sometimes it's like
Yeah.
I might land like a really great idea or make a really great point that shifts the communication or shifts that conversation into a different area that might not have been discussed had I not, you know, like made that point. So it's about taking ownership of the way that we communicate, whether that's a neurodivergent and a neurotypical, you know, just understanding what our styles are and letting other people know that whatever support you need in order for me to like process your information, let me know, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
with the style that you've just described, I'm sure that your neurotypical employees might really find like, a kind of like meeting in the morning quite beneficial where you cover like certain topics, maybe like an agenda could be set out beforehand so that they are aware of the topics that are going to be discussed. And then towards the end of the day, like you could kind of like debrief, with like kind of, I don't know, like a written style of
Yeah.
communication.
Over the years, of course, as a business owner, multiple business owner, also a serial entrepreneur, of course, I learned, and we developed some specific systems, but I hear that, a lot. That's the reason why I asked you, because so that, the listeners and anyone who's watching, who is a founder and neurodivergent can learn. Your TEDx talk was amazing, and I suggest anyone to, Google and watch the TEDx talk because it's just amazing. It's very inspiring and it explores adventure in neurodiversity. You start with your own experience, with your own story. How does that philosophy speak to, a little bit if we come to woman, how woman can harness difference as a strength in business and identity?
I think it's about like really understanding like I think I'm still kind of like figuring out the woman aspect of that because as I've said, I really kind of relate in terms of like the neurodivergent aspects
Hmm.
of my lived experience. And it's something that I am still like very much working on. What I would say is that it's about kind of understanding that being feminine doesn't necessarily mean like suppressing like certain aspects or like overcompensating in other areas. It's just about kind of trying to be as authentic as possible and understanding that like, whatever your calling is in life, just follow it, right? Like put action into it every single day and get the right support that you need, create a psychologically like safe environment, like socially and also at work. And yeah, just like basically like do your best, right?
Hmm.
Because my TEDx was more about, the aspects of me masking some of those neurodivergent characteristics for a very, very long time. And it wasn't until I realized that there were many like great qualities about being neurodivergent and, utilizing them as strengths, right?
Hmm.
And
That needs a level of mastery. I mean, I personally struggled, half of my life being a neurodivergent and masking and not knowing about it. And just feeling, just being strange the whole time, the whole group thinking a certain way and you're just strange.
yeah,
And
belonging is really important,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Belonging is a
yeah.
massive part of a
Yeah, and also
person's,
psychological safety, what you said has been
yeah,
is also very important for neurodivergent individuals. Psychological safety, safe environment, finding a way to cool down, finding ways to
process information,
process
emotions.
information and that depth, because sometimes that depth is too much, and I found it in meditation, like daily regular meditation that just cools down the whole process, and these are very important. Yeah, you're such a amazing individual, a big inspiration, for people like us to just embrace it and know that it's your power instead of it's your strength,
Yeah,
not your
because I think
weakness.
a lot of neurodivergent people like think, oh, that there's something wrong all the time. And no, there's nothing wrong with you. It's like the system is built so that we can't necessarily thrive in that system. So it's on us to basically like build those systems where we can thrive, right? And I've been fortunate enough to work in talent attraction where I've seen how the systems are not geared for women or neurodivergent people. Like, I've looked at the gender pay gap and it really is like a very interesting one. And I'm not even going to talk about the ethnic pay gap because that's something that, a lot of companies are going to be like very like, that's something like that gap
Triggered.
that gap needs to be bridged. But yeah, like neurodivergence as well, right? Like we have to start coming forward and seeking support, right? Whether that's in each other, whether that's like, okay, we really like need to start making some money, you know, we want to like build a career, like how do we go off and basically like, you know, get onto that ladder? And yeah, how do we grow as individuals, right? Because we
Yeah.
have the right to grow, right? And it's like growth is something that is so important in like all of us, right? If we're not growing, then what's the point? Like it doesn't
Yeah.
matter how much like material wealth you gain. It's about like understanding like yourself, and work is a massive part of that,
Yeah.
right?
Expression.
Yeah, having the
Yeah.
right to like blurting your idea out, or you know, having the right, like if you feel like you've just said something like really silly. I mean, I'm sure lots of neurotypical people
Do that as well.
experience
Yeah.
that as well. Like that's
Yeah.
a human emotion, right? So it's
Yeah.
about not internalizing and stigmatizing ourselves like all the time, because it's tiring, you know, to feel like, oh, there's something wrong with you, there's something wrong with you, like all the time. Like, look, like let's start kind of, you know, enabling each other. And the more that the workforce sees neurodivergent people, the more that, you know, we'll start understanding like the
Yeah.
benefits of it as well, like pattern recognition as well. Like
Yeah.
neurodivergents
Yeah.
are a lot better at spotting patterns. And I think like a lot of like security services are actually recruiting neurodivergents now because they've realized that pattern recognition is something that we're better.
Yes, using that as a mentor myself, just giving feedback to people about their pattern and their lives. It's just we're great at that.
You know,
It's
even
sort of
like, yeah, I always say
mapping it out.
like
Yeah,
micro
yeah,
expression, like it can be the smallest thing, right?
yeah,
And it's like, I always said that I had like a bit of a sixth sense. And now I've realized actually I can spot a lie like very, very quickly. And I
yeah.
use it not so much like, I mean, I think maybe like, I'm not going to talk about it at
Yeah,
work,
we're like
but
lighters. Same.
personally,
Right.
in like my
Same.
personal life, I can see shifts,
Yeah.
right? And it's really funny because like it can be the slightest shift of tone in like yeah, like a social like let's say family, right?
Yeah, I think it's about reading the energy. That's what we do. It's like you just see
Pattern,
what's
it's
not
pattern
there.
recognition,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
pattern
And even
recognition.
in
Yeah,
micro expressions, like this is what
yeah,
I've understood. So like I had an incident yesterday where I was going out for dinner, and I get very anxious if I need a plan, right? Like I've got ADHD. If somebody doesn't give me a time, then I will arrive like 10 hours late, right? Like it's literally extremes. Like I have very extreme behavior. So it's like you'll notice today I was incredibly punctual because I'm literally like somebody that is like, if I'm not on time, like people actually think I'm dead, right? Or like literally, like if I, obviously like that's
very
yeah,
similar.
but
So
it's
yeah,
never right. But no, I've had family where they're just like, you know, if you're not on time, it's like we generally start worrying because we're like something happened to her.
yeah,
But what happens is like I'm either dead punctual, or it's like literally I won't turn up for like literally I'll be like 3-4 hours late. And I've lost so much time as a business woman, right? Like in my life being late and not getting to things in time, right? So now it's like I have massive like anxiety around like how I plan like
yeah,
certain
yeah,
things, right? Because I like to finish a task, right? Because I've had so many
yeah.
projects that have been incomplete before. So like I have a relative that just sometimes like doesn't give me a plan or a time. And yeah, like yesterday we were going for dinner, and you know he was like, oh yeah, we'll organize it, like it's Sunday, you know what, we can relax. And I was like,
I need
listen, I need to know. So in the morning I woke up and I was like, what time, right? Like so it's like literally I was like calling like messaging like a crazy person. And then I realized actually it's like, just give me a plan. Like if you told me, I said like I need a time, like I have a diary, right? It's like I know where I'm gonna be like 3 weeks from now at a certain time because I've put that into my diary. If somebody is not giving me that, then it's like I'm literally gonna spiral into a hot mess very, very quickly. And you know that's about, you know, the people that love me and the people that want to like that have relationships with me, like understand that. And it's something
yeah,
that I am very boundaried around now. Obviously it's like, you know, Like, you can't,
Yeah.
people always like tell me like you can't just like be flexible, right?
Go with the flow.
I can't go
I
with the
can't.
flow.
No, me
No,
neither.
no, I
Me
can't.
neither.
And
Time
no,
and
no,
planning.
like go with the
Then
flow,
it's like when you have the agenda, you go with the flow doesn't work. Yeah,
right?
same
And
here.
it's
It's just
like about understanding that. But pattern recognition, like coming back to my point about that, is that I could, like, once I asked for a specific time from that person, it's like I could sense that there was this kind of like shift, right? That, or it's like, I could almost tell that they were getting annoyed. And it was that literally like, it was literally this moment where I looked at my relative, and it's like he was stood in the corridor, and it's like he just gave me this little glance, and I said, "You're upset with me because it's like I've been very precise about times." And he was just like, "Oh yeah, it's like, why can't you just be like flexible sometimes?" And it's like, because I can't. I need a plan. So it's like, if you're going to make a plan with me, it's like I need a time a week in advance.
yeah,
Otherwise, it's like, don't get stressed out and don't give me those micro expressions that I'm going to pick up on. Right, don't come here and pretend that you're okay, because I will detect it. I'll detect it
yeah.
in your
I
face. I'll
detect.
even detect it in your breath. Like
Yeah,
I can see when your
same,
breathing is
same,
changing, right? And it's
same.
like it's a detective. It's like being
Yeah,
like
it is
constant. I
detective.
think
Yeah,
I could have been a great detective, but that's why a lot of
yeah.
the
Me
security
too.
like services. I think it's is it MI5, MI6? What's it,
Am
MI6?
I? M6. Yeah, yeah.
MI6,
They are using. Yeah,
they're
they are
recruiting
recruiting.
neurodivergents
Yeah,
because they know that we're
yeah.
better at detecting like patterns.
Yeah, of course. I mean, if it's like if a thief or someone who it's like he's lying or he's telling the truth. It's like instant. Yeah, I know what
And
you mean. I love it.
it's patterns. It's like
Yeah.
it sounds like we're just coming from a place of a sixth sense and this hokey pokey stuff. But actually
I thought same thing, six,
I've
but it's
I've
pattern recognition.
realized I've
It's
realized
pattern recognition.
I've realized as I've got older, this is not my sixth sense. I'm a woman, I'm intuitive. I think intuition, I've always said intuition is one of my strongest skills. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, no, no.
Same
It's pattern recognition,
thing. Yeah, I would say intuition as well. I keep on telling my students and people around me that my intuition is so powerful. I just know. I just know. And now, as you say it, yeah, it might be pattern recognition as well. Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah,
people can't lie to me,
yeah. No,
especially like loved ones. So it's an interesting one that I'll see the shift.
yeah,
Interestingly enough, as well, I think that that's one of the reasons why I think it's, as a woman, I think I can use that very well in my like personal life actually.
sure. And I have learned not to say everything I see out loud,
Yeah, like
especially in personal relationships, because sometimes, I mean, this is what I've learned. I'm becoming a wiser woman as I age. I don't speak about everything I see. I mean, it's and I have experienced similar experiences. Like it just happened last week, and my two daughters, they were in the room, and I came into their room and I asked something, and one of them just said something, just a clear lie. And then 5 minutes later, I'm like, you know me, girls. Why I know you. The moment you lie something untrue, I know. You don't need that, and you know me. You know that I see. You know that I know. I know everything, but I don't tell sometimes because sometimes it's just too much on their self confidence. And over the years, I learned not to just say everything I see, although I know.
yeah, but it's like really interesting when you relate that back to, yeah, you're recognizing patterns like
Yes,
very, very
but now you say it,
like
it's
quickly.
probably recognizing patterns, like recognizing. It's
Facial
kind of,
expression, micro
yes, face
expression.
reaction.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, I would say
Breathing, body
I see,
language.
yes, but
I've
something,
realized, yeah, like
yeah, because I told my husband, like every time you say this, you do this. Yeah, it's
for me, it's
pattern.
breathing. Like, honestly, I know when, like, yeah, like I know when people are lying because it's like the breath changes. And it's really like, it's a weird one because it's like literally,
Yeah, yeah.
how do you know? It's
And I
like
sometimes,
you're breathing.
it's like if you brought me, I think it's a similar thing. If I had like 100 people in front of me, I would just pick up like these two slept together, these two slept together, these two had an emotional song, I would just pick it up immediately.
Yeah, right. No, no, absolutely.
With
Like
the
me
breath,
too.
it's like even with a group of 100 people, I would just pick it up, because the energy bond, I see the energy bonding as well. It's very interesting. So much to talk about, but we're out of time now. I love the conversation. Thank you. And
Me
I love
too.
also, I think it's kind of like finding your tribe, and we'll talk about that later on. One last question. If you had a mantra, something that guides you, especially your navigation of power, complexity, and uncertainty, what would that be? Like, what do you say to yourself to, and like I said, you cool down and.
Yeah, I think it's like this too shall pass. And I actually had it engraved on a ring. It's my mantra in life. Like, and I think it's good to understand that when you're having a good time, because we're going to have great moments, right? Like, we're going to have very bad moments in life, right? Like, and this too shall pass makes me center like the good. It don't get so high that you're going to fall off like that cliff when things, get a little bit like turbulent, right? And also in challenging times, it will pass,
This
right?
too, I
Just
love that. I,
carry
yeah,
on.
that is something I wrote in one of my books. It is also Rumi's words.
Yeah, I love
This
Rumi.
too shall.
Reading a book actually about
Yeah.
Rumi, The 40 Rules of Love.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so,
Yeah.
I love Rumi. It's like my favorite.
Yeah, I'm so happy we met. I'm so happy you came here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Grateful for having you. And thanks to all of our listeners. Anyone who's watching us at YouTube, make sure you subscribe to our channel. Is there one last thing you would like to say?
Also, just because we're talking about women and like careers
Neurodivergent.
and success and stuff, I think like one of the things that I've learned as a woman, like having like had this like very interesting career where, I kind of have created this like financial freedom means different things to different people, right?
Mm,
For me, financial freedom is about choice, right? Like having the choice to decide what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. And I think for any like women that are listening, it's an interesting one because
yeah,
yeah, like choice is really important. Independence is really
yeah,
important. I really confused having financial freedom with like material, like wealth when I was younger, and now it's like I'm very much about okay, what does this free me to do? What does this free me from?
yeah, yeah,
Having the
great.
right to
Yeah,
decide myself. I think
yeah,
that's really
yeah,
important.
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.